Over the years, I have had the opportunity to present literally thousands and thousands of pages or slides to audiences around the world in keynotes, in executive briefings, in one-on-one meetings, you name it. And I've also had the opportunity across that same amount of time to coach others in presenting techniques as well. And I thought maybe I'd bring some of those ideas and lessons learned here to Brent's Breakdown. You know, one of the things that comes top of mind is top of mind for me really, is something that comes up in virtually every single coaching session that I have ever done around presentation skills and presentation techniques. And I find that for virtually any individual, particularly who's new at learning how to present from slides, the first thing that we really have to focus on is just simply, what is the teaching point of this slide? So what is the one idea, the one main idea that you're trying to convey to your audience that you need to make sure that they hear, make sure that they sort of engage with, and that ultimately that they take away. So every slide, every page absolutely has to have a teaching point. And not many teaching points, a teaching point. This is something we used to talk about at CEB every day. What is the one teaching point of that slide? But here's where things, I think, get really interesting, because we'd spend a lot of time working on that teaching point, honing that teaching point, crafting it, making it as sharp as possible. And even for presenters who would nail that, who would know exactly what that teaching point is or was and convey it very clearly and articulately, sometimes that presentation would still nonetheless fall flat. Same for me in my experiences, I would present them as well. And that's where I think I learned one of the more powerful lessons that I've learned in my presentation techniques and style over the years, is that every page, you really need to think about not just one thing, but two things. So sure, every page has a teaching point, but every page also has an emotional point. In other words, for any slide, any page that I'm presenting, I need to think about not just what do I want my audience to know, I also simultaneously need to think about what do I want my audience to feel? What is the emotional point of the slide? And I think this is the thing that we all tend to overlook, at least early on in our presentation careers, if you have a presentation career or in a sales call or whatever it might be. And this is actually the thing where it gets not only very interesting, but also where it gets very powerful, because this is where you really build that human connection to your audience. So now what do I mean by that? Every page has an emotional point to it, right? Well, for any given page, there's a whole range of emotions for any given page that you might want your audience to feel. And you really have to stop and think about, well, what is the point of this page? Is the point of this page or the slide to get my audience excited? Is it to scare them a little bit? Is it to get them to squirm? Is it to get them to feel curious? Is it actually to create a little distance, to create a little doubt in their mind? Whatever it is, you need to know that. You need to have that nailed down in your head, because if you know exactly what that emotional point is, then you can convey that emotional point. And how do you do that? By using the language of that emotion. So in the coaching sessions I used to do, I'd ask my, coachees, my colleagues all the time, all right, so what do you want your audience to know on this page? We'd talk about that, we'd hone that, we'd craft it. And then I'd ask, what do you want your audience to feel? And we'd talk about that, and we'd identify, one or two emotions. I want them to feel excited or curious. I want them to feel frustrated. I want them to feel overwhelmed. And then I would suggest, all right, let's pick out words, actual words, and we'd usually use a whiteboard or a flip chart. I'd say, let's write down 4 or 5 words that describe, or at least are congruent with, that particular emotion. And once we'd write down those 4 or 5 words, then I'd simply ask that individual to present that slide one more time. But as they're presenting that slide with that teaching point, just to simply use 1 or 2, maybe 3 of the words from that list that were on that whiteboard. And inevitably, every time we would do that, everyone else in the room would look at me and they'd look at the speaker and say, wow, what did you just do? That was so different. And the point was, what we had done there was simply build an emotional connection. And I think that's a really critical lesson in presenting, whether it's a sales call, a sales presentation, or a keynote for that matter, to ask yourself at any given moment, what do you want your audience to know, but also what do you want your audience to feel, and take them on that emotional journey that you need them to go on in order to come out at the other end with excitement, with curiosity, and with engagement.